Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Angel and today I'm sharing some thrift store makeovers. I've been looking for a desk organizer for a few months now, and I finally found this one at my thrift store. It is heavy, solid wood with 2 drawers and some organizational slots at the top. However, it did have a few scratches and dings on it, so the first thing I'm gonna need to do is fix all of those deep scratches, and I'm just using some wood filler to do that. So I'm going around this entire thing and filling in any of those scratches and imperfections. Then I'll let that set for a few hours. Once I set that aside, I went ahead and started working on the drawers. The first thing I did was take some painter's tape and tape around the inside edge because I'm not actually going to paint the inside, just the outside, and I didn't want to get any paint in there. I also decided that I wanted to change the knobs on here, so you can see I'm filling in those knob holes with some more of that wood filler. I let that dry for a little while, sanded it down, and then I'm going in with some Waverly chalk paint in the color moss for this. Of course, typically I would use white, but I do have a lot of green in my house, and this color is just absolutely beautiful once it dries down. And once this larger piece was done curing with that wood filler, then I did sand it down really good, and I'm going back in with that same moss green color. Once everything was dry, I of course wanted to add a little bit of pretty detail on here. So I'm using these rub-on transfers from Dollar Tree, and I just picked 2 that I liked, and I'm actually laying it over the drawer and some of the main piece and just kind of rubbing it all over that. Now these transfers work a lot better if you tape them down because they will move on you, so just be sure to do that. Now you may also notice I replaced those little knobs with those little vintage handles that I got from Amazon, and then finally, to add just a little more pretty detail to this, I'm just using these brass corners, and I put these at the top and the bottom. For this project, I'm grabbing a large ball of my air dry clay, and I'm going to roll that out really nice and flat, making it about a 1/4 inch thick. Once I have it rolled out nicely, then I'm going to take this lace crochet doily that I have, and I'm going to place it about halfway over my clay, and I'm going to roll that back and forth to leave the imprint a few times. And as you can see, it leaves this really pretty detail. Then I'm just gonna use my razor blade, and I'm gonna make a circle shape. It doesn't have to be completely perfect, but then I'm gonna use this glass hurricane and set my clay piece over top of it. And I'm just gonna use my fingers and kind of spread them apart to give this a scallop shape. Then I'll go back in and work around this clay piece and make those more detailed where I made the scallops. And I'm just going to keep working with this. I think I made a few extra scallops too, just until I was happy with it. Then I'm going to take my finger and some water, and I'm going to rub that water along the edges to smooth those out. Now you may remember this candlestick that I used. I actually cut the top of it off to use for this little birdie here, but of course I kept this and I'm going to be using it for this project. So I am just going to be turning this into a wood look. Didn't really care for the gray, so the first thing I did was paint this with a coat of my white chalk paint. Then I'm going to take some water on my brush and use my brown paint. I'm going to go over this entire thing to start with before I wipe it off. And you'll see once I do start wiping this off, it's going to look a little bit splotchy and not so great. But this is a kind of trust the process thing. So here I'm wiping that off and you see it is not looking the best. But then I'm going to take that paintbrush and I'm not going to add any more paint or water to it. I'm just going to take what's left over on that paintbrush and start moving that wet paint around. So essentially you're purposely dragging paint. Now if your brush starts to get a little dry, you can dip it into a little tiny bit of water and then you're just going to work your way around this candlestick and drag that paint. I set that aside to let it dry, and then I also let my clay piece dry for about 3 days to make sure it was fully cured. Then I sanded down the top edges to make it a little smoother and nicer. Then all I had to do was use some gel super glue to attach this to the top of the candlestick. I came across this huge bag of different sized knitting needles at my thrift store, and I picked it up figuring I could definitely do something with these to incorporate them into my decor. So of course the first thing I wanted to do was kind of stain these a little bit to make them more vintage and older looking and of course darker. So I'm just keeping my paintbrush wet and using some brown paint that I mixed up to stain all of these. Once they were dry, I went back in with some of Waverly's white wax and brushed this on here and then used a paper towel to wipe off any of the excess. And this is not only going to seal them, but it also lightened them up just a little bit and gave them a worn look. Then I wanted to dress just a few of these up so that they're not all the same. So I had this very pretty silk ribbon with the fringed ends, and I'm just going to take a couple of these and wrap some of this ribbon around, and then I cut little pieces so that I could tie that and it wouldn't come loose. Then I just added them all to a clear vase. For this project, I'm going to be using these candle sconces that I found at the thrift store, and I'm actually going to be taking off the candle part, but you will see me paint it because obviously I'm going to keep it for future projects just in case. But I did go in and paint these with 2 coats of my white chalk paint. And in case you do a candle sconce makeover, just know that those little brass pieces at the top will pop right out. But like I said, I'm not actually going to be using the candle cups for this project, so there is a little screws down in there and you can just unscrew those to remove the cups. And once everything was dry, I did go back in with a little bit of sandpaper and just roughed up some of the edges and made some little scrape marks. To decorate these, I'm going to be using this damask stencil that I got from Amazon and some Dollar Tree spackling, which I just mixed up with a few tiny drops of water, and then I'm going to use this Cricut spatula and just spread this all over the top of that stencil to get a raised texture. When you do this, you just want to make sure that you are covering that stencil completely in the area that you are using, and then once you pull that off, you can always scrape off anything that went over the edges. And you do have quite a bit of time to work with this, so if you mess up, you can always just scrape it off and start over. Once I had the first bit finished, then I did rinse off my stencil and I just lined up the pattern, and I'm going to repeat that process. And I always like to just scrape my stencil back off into my cup because you can keep that for another project. And again, once I was finished, then I went in with my finger and just kind of rubbed off excess on the edges. Now I am going to be turning my sconces into little shelves, so I picked up these wood plaques from Dollar Tree, and I decided not to use the same exact shape for both of them, just so they would be a little bit different. I also decided just to stain these, so I'm using a wet paintbrush and some of my brown paint, and I went over both of these plaques with that paint and water combination. Then I will take a paper towel and wipe off any of the excess. I let that spackling dry overnight, and then I went in with some of my European Gold Rub and Buff and my stenciling brush and very gently brushed over this to give it the details. Then to finish it off, I just used some wood glue to attach those shelves to the candle sconces. And that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed these projects. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.